If you look at the construction industry and the way we build stuff, we are very sophisticated. Our problem is that when we take it down again, we are not that sophisticated. It looks like a war. So we need to do something different. And the things that we need to do, why we need to do something different is not only because of resources, it is also because there are some economic benefits. Economic benefits not only to the society, but also us as companies and us as individuals. This is a picture I got from some of the stuff we are making in the Maldives, where we are building it up by elements instead of casting it on site. This means that it could be taken apart and used elsewhere. We also made a business case. We looked into one of the big office buildings in Denmark that we had just created, and we invited universities and demolition companies into a group and architects. And then we told the company, the demolition company that took part of the group, we had this 860 million DKK office building, which is $120 million. We told them that what if that was built on the wrong location and we had to demolish the day after. And they told us that it would cost 16 million kroner to take it down and take it away the day after. We also made a calculation that if we could sell off the concrete elements, we only looked at the superstructure. The superstructure was approximately 430 million out of this 860 million. And if we could sell off the elements from the superstructure to a new site, we would actually be able to earn another 19 million in that area. So combined, the difference between doing the construction in the old way and doing it in the new way is 35 million DKK. That equals 4% of the total construction value or 8% of the value of the superstructure. And in the future, when resources are more expensive and the cost of bringing stuff to the landfill will be higher, it's probably closer to 16%. So when you show these figures to the pension funds that invest in cash flows or the social housing companies that own their buildings forever, they get very interested. The next thing is that if you do what we are suggesting here, design for disassembly, you will also improve flexibility. A lot of buildings will stand for hundreds of years in Denmark, but what we need also flexibility to transform them. I have been working in offices that were built in apartments built together. In some years, we might take them back to apartments again because it's building of high quality and we can use them for a lot of different stuff. The next thing is also faster to construct. We build them faster when we do it like that, and we can also maintain them much better. If you look at one of the projects that we did recently, this is a good project. The building you see in the front here is built by reused bricks. The price of the cheapest brick in Denmark is, just look at the figures, is 3. The price we got from these bricks per brick was 10, and the price for the most expensive you can buy in the market is 35. So we actually managed to put in the price of the reused material in at a price which was 3 times higher because of the intrinsic value of the stones, the architectural value of the stones. We got a price which was 3 times higher than the lowest price in the market and 1/3 of the highest price in the market for different stones with different values and architecture, of course. The next thing we are into now is we are now building we have more than 60 companies, even a couple of our competitors, involved in a project now in Denmark where we want to build it in a way that it's built so that we can reuse 90% of the material in that one. That's now 60 social living houses, which has been where all the concrete elements has been assembled by use of mechanical joints, so we can take them apart and reuse it. I think you'll get all the slides afterwards, just take the pictures, but I'm pretty sure you will get them. This is another thing that we actually made 10 years ago at the COP15 in Denmark with the Velux. It is a roof living that you can put on existing buildings. We built it for the COP15 to demonstrate that you could how to make a net zero energy house. And actually 1 year after we had done that, it was on a storage facility. It was brought to France and re-erected in La Rochelle in France for Velux 5 Ocean World Cup, and it's still there. It was given by Velux to the municipality afterwards. So that's an example of a house that can be moved from one place to another when it's needed no more. Then we also looked into how is the economics of circular economy, and what we found is that the larger parts you can take away, the larger parts you can reuse, the more value you have, the more money you save, and the more energy you of course also save. We have a facility within our company that do pre-assembled boxes that we make actually by robots, 100% by robots now, and we can take them to the construction site and finish the buildings. And after 10, 15, 20 years, we can take them to somewhere else, if it's temporary office buildings or temporary facilities at medical companies or stuff like that. And of course, most important, I forgot to say that, where you save most environment, most resources, and most money is when you refurbish what you already have. That's also why we should take into consideration how we can build our buildings in a way that we can transform them for future uses, because our buildings will stand for generations if we make them correct. Taking this to a European scale, we had the 35 million from the project we had. If we took that onto a European scale, we'll be able to save 13 billion euro a year. That will be the benefit to the European Union. They are also very interested in this. And the cost would actually be close to zero. We assessed that it will be 0.35% for the first 3-4 years, while the designers have to learn to find new ways to assemble buildings. And after that, that will be the new standard. And when that becomes the new standard, there are no new costs. Then we also looked into how could this affect society? And we got a study from, which is called Waste to Wealth, from Accenture. And Accenture said that they looked into that we would actually miss growth in the world economy of $4.5 trillion already in 2030, and approximately $25 trillion in 2050, due to the lack of resources if we are not getting more productive, more resource productive. If you look at how we will do it for real, there are a lot of different strategies, there are a lot of different things you can do, but you can categorize most of it in these three. First and foremost, you have to design for disassembly. Next thing is that you have to have a material passport. That is, you have to have an understanding about what the content is of the different materials, or in order to use it in 50, 60 years from now. And then you have to create a market that is what we call the circular economy. We went into the board, we saw that the challenge was the joints. There is no reason to do anything else but doing the joints differently. We looked at how they do in other industries. This is a mobile phone you're seeing over there in the corner, and a car from the car industry, of course. We are making no cars in Denmark, but we are still exporting for trillions to the car industry, at least billions to the car industry, because we do a lot of the small feathers, a lot of the small stuff that they use in every car in Europe, whether it's a Mercedes or an Audi or whatever. Then we also looked into how we actually assembled stuff in the old industry. I am a carpenter by trade before I started engineering, and have made a lot of assemblings like that, and it still works. It worked in the old days because then you could move your farm if you were to go somewhere else, and you can also in the steel industry look at the steel there. The value of the steel, if you break it down, is 2-3 kroner. Don't bother with the value, but 2-3, it's probably, when it's painted with several layers bolted together, the value is 10 times higher. So if you can reuse it without having to remold it, the value is 10 times higher. Then we also looked into the superstructures of concrete, and we can actually use these joints here, which is fabricated in Finland by Paiko in Finland, and that allows us to very easily put that column in place. We actually use it on some of our sites now in order to build faster, because we can put loads to that column the day after. If you use traditional methods, we would cast under it and have to wait a week or two before it's solid enough to put loads to it. Then there's another joint there from Paiko. So what we actually aim to do is that we aim to find a way that we can make a scenario in which we can say that the deconstruction process is just the construction process in reverse. So when you're looking at this picture, you should not be able to tell me whether we are building the house or whether we are taking it down. And then we looked into different projects that was made by the architect 3XN. This is the Olympic headquarters in Switzerland that we have up here. And then we looked into, they built very, very fantastic and special buildings, out of this world buildings. But again, between 60 and 80% are just cores where we could reuse these elements. Then going back to the second challenge, which was the material passport. If we look into other industries again, we can see that Maersk, the largest container company in the world, transporting containers all over the world, when they ordered their last 10 cargo ships, they actually asked to get all the steel marked in the different values because they knew that they were probably going to reuse that steel for the next generations of ships. Then we also look into the construction industry. We have started to get a lot digitalized. We have 3D, 4D, 5D models of almost everything we do now. So we also have the capability not only to load in all the physical dimensions, but also to save them for the future. And we actually have clients who ask us to provide them with a digital model of their building. When we hand it over, they want to use it for maintenance and operations. And that could also be used when you want to sell your products off for future use in other buildings, because then you will know everything about that element, about the reinforcement, about the quality of the steel, the quality of the concrete, and so on and so forth. We are actually also working with Consolis, which is one of the largest European pre-manufactured concrete elements. They are putting in different chips into the elements, so even if we lose some of the information, okay. So the challenge now is also to create the market. The market can be created very fast by putting this information to the internet, or we could store it temporarily. Then we also have to look at the landscape, we have to look at the laws, and we have to create a market. And these are the partners working together, and I won't use more of your time now. I hope you got something out of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I would like to welcome second speaker, Ms. Jessica Rees-Levers, from Circular Economy Advisor of the Rijkswaterstaat, Netherlands.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, where is that? Oh, it's here. Thanks. How is everybody doing? All right. How's the energy level here? You ready? This is almost the final presentation of today. So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jessica Rees-Levers. I work for Rijkswaterstaat, which is the executive body of the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. We are also mainly responsible for managing and constructing the roads and waterways of the Netherlands. And we are doing this in a circular way. I'm here today to tell you how we are, facing this challenge together with the market. But before I do so, I have a question for you. The question is, which of this building is the most circular one? If you look at the first one, the Amsterdam temporary courthouse, it was built for disassembly. I think my colleague John told us pretty much a lot about it. The Venlo City Hall, which was created with cradle-to-cradle principles. The presentation is gone. Thank you. Yes. Wait. No, you're giving it too much away. Thanks. The third building, Leander Office, which was almost completely built with only reused materials. Or Hotel Jakarta of Amsterdam, which is actually known as a building that breathes air because it has been almost completely constructed with only wood and bamboo elements. So go ahead, who thinks it's the first building? Whoops. Who thinks it's the first building? Or the second one, the third one? Raise your hand for the first one. All right. Raise your hand if you think that the second one is the most circular one. Yeah. The third one? Hey. What about the fourth one? All right. So the room is pretty much divided, and I mean, I'm afraid to tell you, or I'm sorry to tell you, but there are no winners or losers. Because there is actually, how to say, I wanted to say that there is so many definitions of the circular economy nowadays that is actually necessary to, you know, like test a little bit of your comprehension of the circular economy in order to not, you know, like get into misunderstandings. You can see here, I think this article was made public in 2012. That's more or less, make the calculations, 8 years ago. And there were already more than 114 definitions of the circular economy. In the Netherlands, a circular economy is an economy in which the materials are reused efficiently. If new materials are needed, they will be extracted in a very sustainable way. And most importantly, we look at design. Every little product and every little material has to be designed in a circular way. So we have the ambition. We want to be a fully circular economy by 2050. You know, this is pretty much an economy without waste. And when we set this ambition, we pretty much knew that we weren't going to manage to do this by ourselves. So we asked the sector to come with us, work with us, and it was in 2016 we managed to bring about, to organize 400 organizations which shared the same ambitions as ours, and we developed 5 different transition agendas, which basically also stand for 5 different sectors that have a lot of environmental impacts. Among others, the construction sector. So, but why do we have to work towards a circular construction sector? Again, John told us a lot about it, but it's pretty much because of the fact that globally, we are responsible for almost 50% of all the carbon emissions. And if you look at this segment, the materials, concrete and steel and aluminum accounts for almost 23%. This is a lot for one single sector only. In the Netherlands, we are responsible, the construction sector is responsible for around 50% of the total raw materials consumption. This is a lot of material. And we, as the road authority of the Netherlands, we use large volumes of these materials. We're not really talking about materials that are scarce. We pretty much use sand and soil in our works, but the volumes, again, they are exceptional. You know, like if you look at sand, we use a lot of sand for our beach replenishment or soil for our dikes. I'm sorry, it's not really translated in English, but you can see that the green parts over there, it's like it shows the environmental impact of sand replenishment only, and this is pretty much associated with the transport of it. Other materials that we use are asphalt and concrete, and even though we don't use them as much as soil and sand, They are very much responsible for a high footprint in this world. Luckily, we recycle these materials for years already. So, wait a second. If we are recycling all these materials, why is it a problem? Well, the problem is that we are not recycling them in a circular way yet. Let me explain to you. The building sector in the Netherlands is pretty much divided into subsectors. We have the utility construction sector, which is basically buildings, and we have the civil engineering sector, which is the infrastructure sector. We are responsible for the infrastructure. We are big buyers of these materials. Around 98% of the materials, they are already used by us. We use them in our road foundations, for instance. So the use of secondary resources is pretty much normal. But the problem is that we're not using these materials in a high value. So let me give you an example. The concrete that we are using from the buildings, they are used as road foundation, but not as a new material for concrete. And this is not what we want. And if you look at the building sector, only 3% of the materials are going back. So the inflow of new raw materials is still very big, and we have to do something about it. So our work is about to get started. Here you have some impressions of our works. So this is why we came up with a different ambition for the building sector. We, together with the sector, we said, okay, now we want to be completely circular and climate neutral by 2030. So we know where we want to go, but we don't know how to get there. And this is why we are heavily investing in a lot of knowledge and innovation development through pilots, through living labs, through research. And we as the government, we are also heavily investing in circular public procurement and in our role as a launching customer for innovations. By doing so, we do not only contribute to an economy without waste, we don't only contribute to the achievement of the climate agreements, but also to the achievement of some of the sustainable goals. So, let me explain to you how we go about then circularity. In every little project that we carry out, we look at ways to design it in a circular way. After all, the circular economy is all about circular design. So while designing a new project, we looked at ways to prevent the use of new raw materials. And we also look at ways to retain, but also create the value of the existing materials. So let's check some of the examples. The rejuvenation cream for asphalt. This is a very good example of preventing the use of new materials and for creating value for existing materials. You know, by the simple use of this cream, we can repair road cracks and we can refill bitumen. And this pretty much extends the life of asphalt for almost up to 4 years. This is a low-hanging fruit measure and should be applied on a large scale, actually. This is one of our most innovative and challenging examples. We, together with the sector again, we developed the very first circular viaduct in the Netherlands. And this viaduct is pretty much built to be disassembled and completely reassembled in a new location without any loss. And well, what you see is different building blocks, concrete blocks, which were built with Lego design. Are you aware of the concept? And they can be easily transported. They can also be adapted. You can use them to lengthen the viaduct or to make it wider. And the challenging factor in this was that we created this in an open learning environment. So anybody who wanted to build knowledge, contribute to it, was pretty much welcome. Whoa, so. The Arc Bridge Vienna, what you see here is a very old bridge. It's a very old bridge, and because it couldn't contain any more traffic, it was nominated to be completely demolished. And in the circular economy, we cannot allow that. If it was to be demolished, this bridge would go directly to the Tata Steel recycling company, and we wanted to give it a new destination. So we looked at ways to reuse it in various different ways, such as reusing the whole bridge for a completely new destination. We looked at ways to use smaller parts of the bridge and give it a different destination, maybe for foundations for a building. But we didn't manage yet to find a new destination for this bridge. So we are literally trying to find buyers for this very old bridge, but which has so much value. We'll skip this example. We talked about data today already, and data is becoming increasingly important in the world's economy, and that's also the same case for the circular economy. So we have to actually get insights into which materials are being used in our works so that we can actually retrieve them and recover them when a building is being dismantled or being renovated. And we are experimenting ways to do so in the infrastructure sector together with materials passports, and also a very interesting platform which allows the creation of a dating website for materials. So you can exchange materials also with other parties in the very same sector. The very last example of my presentation is what we call the circular road furniture. As we are responsible for the management of our highways, we are also responsible for putting circular products in the highways. So we are looking at ways to only use renewable materials for our road signs, for instance. In this very idealistic scenario, we will do it ourselves because we have to manage all the grass growing through the highways, but because of difficulties in the legislation, we cannot do it. So we are encouraging companies to come with concepts, to come with products, bio-based products, for our infrastructure, for our highways, and we pretty much reward them. They reward their efforts by procuring, by buying these materials for the long run. Guys, what I mentioned, the examples that I gave to you, is just like a little piece of an ever-growing catalog of very successful, innovative, circular innovations that we build up together with the sector. I cannot stress enough how important it is to work with different parties. The public, the private, the knowledge institutions. This is how we're going to bring about a circular economy. And I pretty much assure you that if we carry on like this, I mentioned in the beginning, we don't know how to get there, but I don't think that will be an issue anymore. So, Terima kasih. Thank you very much for your attention, and I see you maybe later at the booth. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jessica, and I would like to welcome Mr. Martin.
So I'm the final one
The final
today,
one
for the whole day or just for this session?
For the whole day.
For the whole day, and still some people there. Oh, I'm lucky. Okay. Oh, it started. Yes, I need. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Well, after these two speakers, mainly talking about the construction sector, the first was more, I think, more in the utility part actually, and Jessica was more in maybe infrastructure. But let's say I first. Let's see, this one works. It's the lower one? First my name. It's a long, difficult name. So if you want to remember it, I put the card on it. If you want to contact me, you can still find the email address here. Yes, make a picture, but I think they will send these presentations around. So, yes, you got it? Okay. Circular economy. Well, you often see here, especially in Indonesia, that circular economy, then they talk about recycling and all the things, but that's more waste management. You can also talk about sustainable waste management. But there is a difference, and the big difference is that from our perspective, from our experience, sustainable solid waste management, that is something that the government can strongly initiate it and actually execute. They can make rules, and even the cities can do it themselves. They can collect it, they can even compost it, they can incinerate it, they can do whatever with it, what they like. Circular economy is not that same game. Circular economy is something that we have to ask the market to do. And that's a different ball game for the authorities, because they cannot create these products. The authorities don't make products. They don't make circular economy. It says economy. It's something of the market. It's not from the government. The market has to do it. And that is very clearly what Jessica already demonstrated a lot. We have to make the conditions worthwhile for companies to produce these circular products. And that's the thing, that's what we're trying to do in the Netherlands. Meaning we're doing it for the whole market, for all the products. And as you can see, we separated actually in 5 categories, so say 5 sectors, whatever you call it. But that's more because they're kind of a clustering of stakeholders what you're involving here. Clustering of the material streams that are together in it. That makes it very practical. And this picture is very, well, let's say it's very characteristic for the process. They're not just government people here, no, there are people here from the industry, people from the employers association, even the union was there are the knowledge institutes are joining in. So it's also an effort, because it's a circular economy, an effort that has to come and supported by everyone. So we did it like this, and that means that you don't start or making or trying to get circular products. No, first you're trying to organize it. Organize it in what way are we going to do this? In what way are we going to support the industry to do it? So it took us actually 5 till 6 years to make that process work. Meanwhile, of course, some companies started already to produce circular products. Fine to me. Let 1,000 flowers blow. How do you say it? 1,000 flowers bloom. No problem. But it has to be somehow all the time facilitated by everyone. So everyone was supporting and everybody saw the benefits of it. And if you talk now to employers, if you talk to companies, if you talk to knowledge institutes, they all say there's no way back now anymore. We went on this track and this is the future. So the marker is set and we're gonna leave linear economy in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years. It will happen. There's no way back anymore. So another dimension is, if you're talking about these material streams in a circle, closing the loops, then you know that you can't do that in your own country because the value chains, they go over the borders. So we have to work with Denmark, for instance. If you, well, you gave the example of the cars. Yeah, we're an example of the cars. But for instance, for other products, electronics, often produced in China, exported to Europe. If we want to have them circular so that we can demolish them and reuse the parts or whatever, we have to go to China and say, China, make these products differently. Don't glue them together. I want something that I can demolish them again or refurbish them again. That's actually the idea of circular economy, working in closed loop stakeholders together. So if we want it, we can make legislation in Europe and say, you can only import it when it's made in this or that way. And I think for the future that will happen. The circular design is already a great discussion issue in Europe. Okay, industry might not always want it, what we want, but it will come that way. You're convinced, eh? Absolutely, yeah, okay. Well, let's see if it still works. The bottom one, no. See, you have to get it active. Okay. Very clear difference between a sustainable solid waste management and circular economy is 7 E's, or REs. You always, in Indonesia, you know the 3 R's. Very familiar. In circular economy, you've got 10 R's. Meaning, it's all the R's that you can do in other parts of the value chain. That's actually very important. So it also creates new opportunities. What I'm going to do now in this presentation, I don't go into details for everything, but I'm just going to show you from different sectors how these different new R's are actually, well, some examples how they actually use these R's and create or shape or make or use the materials differently. And I'll do that in the 5 sectors that I've just shown you before. Just show you 3, maybe 2 or 3 examples, because currently there are hundreds of them in the Netherlands. And I can't show them everyone, and I can't go into detail too long on everyone. So I'll just give you some examples, and I give the credit to the companies who are doing it, because we're expecting the companies to do the work. So they should have the credits and be on this floor, actually. A small selection. Biomass and food. Fosfaatje. This is actually from Waternet Amsterdam. Waternet Amsterdam is actually controlling the waterways around Amsterdam, but in a big area also for instance, drink water supply, but also for management of the canals in Amsterdam, etc. And also, and that is actually this example, also the cleaning of the sewage water in Amsterdam. And cleaning sewage water, in the sewage water is a lot of phosphate. And phosphate is one of the elements for one of the products that we need for our agriculture that is actually really on the list of, let's say, getting real scarce for the future. So recovering the phosphate in any way is very important, especially for countries who have agriculture. If you want to know more about this, contact me, because there is a lot more what Amsterdam does on this field. This is also in Amsterdam interesting. There you see a hotel. A hotel that's trying to circulate the products. Actually, they're creating loops together in their hotel about the products they're using. So first they have a sink with fishes in it. Fishes they consume, but the fishes also get food, they poop, and the water goes out filtered, and the filtered water is going to the plants. And the plants are taking, yeah, well, you know what I mean. Yeah, I can see it. You see, the plants take the nutrients, so they're raising all the plants like herbs, like tomatoes, and it's all in a watery environment. That's what a hotel does. So you see the innovation on every sector, how it's possible to make things more circular. Very interesting. This is one also, I saw some examples here in Indonesia, black soldier fly. How can you actually create from food waste, again, new high value proteins? Proteins you can use in many, many ways. There are some companies in the Netherlands who actually developed equipment for doing this with not only with food waste, also with mixed waste. So it's a very interesting thing about how you can actually have waste and revalue the waste. Revalue is actually an important thing. Revalue the material, keep it in a high value or bring it even to a higher value. A nice example I saw on a 3R station in Surabaya. If you have the opportunity, go there. Nice to see. Waste transformers. Small scale, container scaled digestion. Digestion is not so new, but it's actually that you can actually here set up digestions in modules and also transport it and relocate it again. These kinds of things are also very interesting because then you don't have to build it and let's say build again one on a new spot, and if it doesn't work anymore and so on. Well, this is also a way of making things mobile. And this is also a very interesting thing. It's not only about things that we can see on materials, but also in the air, CO2. Well, if you connect to the climate, it's of course very interesting how you can reuse CO2. And in our horticulture, they need extra CO2 for the plant growing. So there is actually a kind of a closing loop. So from a, let's say, a leftover from one industry is used as a resource in another industry. So industrial symbiosis, that's the word for this. Then something on construction. I won't tell too much because it was already said, but to just mention this company, Madaster, that is actually a company who is developing what you're and what Jessica was actually about the material passport. How do you make a system that everybody can use for having a good idea about the value and how do you say, the sorts and the amounts of materials that are still there after 20 years. Is it just the basic materials, or is it in the way it's built? Is it modeled? Can you reuse the modules, and etc.? So a full passport on all the characteristics of the construction, actually as it is now, that you can use it for the future again. And well, this is one, I will skip this one because it was already something said about it. This is what I can also skip because initially Jessica would be there after my presentation, so I would tell her that she was still coming, but she already did her presentation. Consumer goods. That's interesting, of course, because we've got a lot of consumer goods. And a lot of consumer goods are just thrown away, have a very short lifetime. You know, just fashion. You see how are we having in our cupboards or throwing away or whatever. So it's a high turnover, and actually something could be done a lot better with that. This example, Fairphone, mobile phones, nice example. They need upgrading every year according to well, a big company in the world. They want to present every year a new model. You wonder what the new is on the model, but still they buy, and the old models they just thrown away or whatever. You can also make mobile phones more modular, that you can actually upgrade more yourself. It's not in their interest, I know that, but it's possible to do that. It's possible to upgrade it on the hardware, but also on the software, because the software upgrade is also an issue. So there's a lot to be done there. But we need to, say, push these industries, and they're harder to push because they have a good market now. But that's an interesting concept. Another one is laundry washing. There was a nice research, I think it was the British who did that, of seeing what is the price, okay, 1 minute left, what is the price of a washing machine and how long does it last? Well, we've got these very expensive washing machines that last very long. And everybody wanted, actually, there's a good quality washing machine. You want to buy it, everyone wants, but not everybody can buy it because it's very expensive. But eventually, if you look very good at the pricing of the cheapest washing machine and the most expensive washing machine, per washing turnover, it's no difference. It's only, can you invest it instantly? That's the only problem. Well, this is a way of doing that everybody can actually have the most, to say, the most highest quality washing machine. Not by buying it, but by paying for every washing turn. Some companies who supply these high quality machines are already offering this. Cool rake recycling, I'll skip this one, this is a recycling. Mud jeans, recycling of jeans, recycling on a fiber basis. And that's interesting, because that is developing now also for the textile industry. The recycling of the fibers. This is also an interesting thing. Water. It doesn't seem to be very difficult to have water, but to have good water qualities is very difficult, and have good industrial water quality is also very difficult. For dyeing, they developed a new process, not using water for the solution as a solution material, but using CO2 as a solution material. It's not only saving a lot of water, but also saving a lot of energy. Plastics. This is an interesting on recycling of PVC. PVC is always considered a very difficult material. But if you can actually collect the PVC and recycle it, and PVC is a very good recyclable material. Well, you know that from construction too. It's an excellent recyclable material. And this is a new development in, let's say, creating better and higher qualities of plastics. We know all the Titec infrared separation. This is a new development on different kind of separation techniques that allows a very high quality output. And on high, let's say, and then we're speaking about 98% quality output. This is something that we've developed with the industry also here in Indonesia, with the plastic value chain, with brand owners, with all other stakeholders in the plastic chain, that we define some projects to replace, especially the multi-layer plastics. That's a problem here in Indonesia. Manufacturing industry, well, this is something for you. Yeah, that's refurbishing, especially the old houses from the 60s. It's very interesting, but there are some companies that are specialized now in refurbishing these houses and making them up to the standard of isolation and use of, well, nowadays. And Philips Healthcare remanufacturing, that is especially interesting because healthcare equipment is very expensive, so remanufacturing is interesting for this industry. And light as a service, well, rethink is one of the REs, the new REs. Rethink, again, you don't buy anything about light equipment, but this is even the strongest and the deepest one. You only buy for the light, the lux on light, per lux. And you don't pay your electricity bill, you don't pay for the equipment. The producer is doing all that for you, but he's only charging you for the lux that you're using. And that's a whole new concept. That's a little bit like a car. You don't even have the lease contract. No, you only pay for the kilometers or the miles that you're driving. That could be the concept for cars in a similar way. And as I said at the start, this is only a small selection. If you want to have a full scope and a full idea of what is already done by the industry from small startups to the real multinationals, go to this website and you will see a lot more. So actually the process, it's not a process, it's already, we're in a steep line of transition at the moment. So there is no way back. We're going to have a circular economy on a short run or a long. It will be a long run, I think, but it's only going that direction. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you'll be part of it. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Martin. And now I would like to invite all speakers to come back again to the stage. this session is really, really interesting because we got many, many perspectives and also case studies from Denmark and also from Netherlands about how to implement circular economy and what kind of sector that give opportunity to be implemented in Indonesia. And I would like to invite from the audience, if there is a question, you could stand your hand. Any question?
Thank you very much. My name is Morten from the Embassy of Denmark here in Jakarta. Thanks for 3 very nice and inspiring presentations. I'm very happy to see those practices being demonstrated here. For those of us who are here in the morning, we heard from the Indonesian National Planning Agency, Bappenas, that they are putting the word circular economy in their next 5-year plan. I think that's, of course, a big step forward. I mean, that means that at least it's on the agenda. But we also heard that there are big problems in how to measure that. How do we see how far we come? I know 5 years is still maybe a short term for the circular economy, but still somehow, how do we measure how to get there? So based on some of your super good examples here, and maybe especially for those of you who represent kind of semi-government institutions, how do you measure that? How does the government measure some of all these things so that they can tell the community, the nation, that we are getting ahead of the circular economy? I would like that also to come into the note of this forum, because I know that some of the proceedings also will be used to feed into the Indonesian government. So that's my question.
Yeah. The indicator, it will be part of Bappenas national agenda. And if you could share the expertise and also how to measure the progress and also the impact.
I think I'll give this one to you.
Sorry. Yeah, how to measure is something that, let's say, the more formal way is a European question, because this is a European policy and we want to have a measure on a European level that everybody will actually accept as a way of doing that. But a more simple way is, of course, it's about closing the loops. It's about saving resources. And the most easiest way is to check where in the value chain the losses are of your materials. So reducing the losses of materials is a very easy check on improvement of circular economy. And one very clear is because you can actually look at every part, you know, at the production, at the transport, at the user part, at the waste part, but also at the recycling part again, because even recycling is not always 100% recycling. There are also losses. Meaning, and of course then landfilling and incineration is also loss of materials. There are a lot of leaks still to be closed, and I would say if you don't have a very, let's say, a formal, generally accepted, because they're still working on that, just concentrate on the points where the losses are and measure where the improvement can be made or are made. Well, reducing landfilling and incineration is, of course, already a very easy one to measure. Hopefully it doesn't end up in the environment then, but let's see if you control that. That's the most easiest way actually to do it, for the moment.
Well, if I could add anything to your response, with regards to circular indicators, I don't know if your question also touches upon this, but the development of a circular indicator for the circular economy has been something that has been on the agenda for a few years by now. We are constantly trying to develop a circular indicator for circularity so that we can also within projects see what's the impact of it. In the Netherlands, we work with an instrument called the double calc. It pretty much measures the environmental impacts and the climate impacts of our projects. But we are, again, like I said, trying to find ways in order to incorporate circularity in that model. We're still in the very first test phase, but it has a lot of potential. I must say that. But again, it's a learning process, and we do not yet have a very integral methodology to measure circularity.
I probably also have a couple of ideas to add to that after having been thinking about it. We work with Horten Advocater, Horten Lawyers in Denmark, which is one of the largest law firms. And we actually managed to put in some proposals also to some of the ministers of the former parliament. We have just had a new parliament, and some of them has unfortunately left. But we used some time suggesting that if you used circular design, like we have discussed today, which is a prerequisite for a circular economy, you could apply for allowance of building 0.5% more on your lot. That would create quite an economic incentive for clients to actually take this step. You could also apply for building 0.5% more on your lot if you used a certain amount of recirculated materials in the new build. That could actually be two ways to promote circular economy, and ways that could be used simultaneously to measure it, because then you will apply for it when you apply for the building permit.
Second question.
So during your presentation, you were talking about the difference between the solid waste management and the circular economy. And when we are looking into the circular economy, it should be for the whole value chain involving different players in this one. When you talk about the practical aspects, what is the biggest challenge you faced while bringing all those stakeholders together?
The question is for?
For Martin, Mr. Martin. Yeah. No, I was also talking about the same topic. We need to look into the value chain perspective, but I'm a pure academician. So I would like to hear few challenges in a practical world.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges, and that's what we noticed already when we were talking with the different stakeholders in the plastic value chain, that there is a strong need, for instance, between recyclers and producers. Because recyclers, they notice that some products cannot be recycled or recognized by infrared scanning or all these kind of things. So that producers are aware that the way they're producing that can have a negative impact on the possibilities of retrieving the materials again or retrieving parts of the products. So that is, I think, the biggest challenge, to come together and, you know, don't sit in your own strong house and think you can do it on your own, as a designer, for instance. So talk to the other stakeholders and experience what are the difficulties to close the loops really on other parts of the chain. And especially it starts always with the designer. The designer is actually crucial, because once you do it not in the right way there, it's hard to do anything else better, because there is actually where we should address all the issues. And that's difficult because designers already have a long list of all kinds of criteria that they have to fulfill in their products, on security, on marketing, on, well, so, and now this comes extra again, but it's important, because then what you create then is that the producer is involved, actually directly involved in the quality and the quantity, especially the quality at the waste, end of waste phase. Because he gets an influence on it, and he knows what the material is. Like with the material passport, if you know what's on the end, you get interested in the material again. So then it's actually starting in your brain, oh yeah, this is a valuable resource for me again. So I should actually take care that this material at the end is also value to me. And that's actually the big challenge, to connect these stakeholders together, that once the product is not in use anymore, that we've already made it in a way that the producers say, I want it actually back. So you have take-back systems. That's where producers already think if they take it back, it should have still the good quality or quantity or whatever, that they can reuse it again. So connecting that is, I think that's the big challenge, not only for bottles, but for all products.
Oh, yeah, if I can add something to your answer. Yeah, we are increasingly having or like discussing about ownership. Should we own the products in order to create that extra value to the materials? And that's when the service as a product business model comes in. You want to be the owner of your products, and you want to provide it as a service so that you can get it back. And that's how you also can create extra value for your own materials, for your products.
I think what is very important to realize now at the beginning of a circular economy, which is that we need to collaborate, which has been said by a number of people today, and I think it is important we collaborate, as I mentioned before, also with some of our competitors, because we need to define new standards according to which we can demonstrate that this works. We have written a couple of books which are out there. You can find them on net. Building a Circular Future is one of them. The next thing is that we are now doing these demonstration projects, and going forward we will work with a Danish standard and other standard bodies also to create new standards that client can feel safe with, because that's also a thing we have to incorporate in our new solutions. That is that the clients that buy these products from this industry have to have a certain degree of certainty that what they buy are solutions they can use. And in order actually to create the market and the size of the market and gain a volume in the market, we need to collaborate across industries. And finally, no company has all the knowledge needed. We need to collaborate. Even though we are a huge company that has 100 years of tradition, we need tons of information from other actors in the market.
We are such a good team.
Yes, it's really important to understand about the market and also integration between each party. And I would like to open for the third question, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Elvina from Regional Jakarta Government. I would like to ask about the first presentation from Mr. John. You mentioned about joint method for construction the building. Do you, for the joint method, considering that Indonesia has a big earthquake, so is it safe for the earthquake area? And then if yes, how do you check it after the earthquake for the impact of the shaking for the bolt? And then the second question about your circle house, 90% recyclable. So is that any specific material you use for the recycle building? And then is your government involved in the policy of recycle building? If yes, what kind of involvement they have? Thank you.
Okay, to start with the second question first, the government is not involved. There is a social housing company which has some kind of public subsidiary to it, which means that even though we have been part of developing it, it has to be tendered to the market and competitors can tender for the project too. We are also disclosing all material, and we have not been part of the tender process because we cannot bid then. So we brought it to a stage where we came with one solution to the market, published everything, and then it's out as a turnkey project, which means that the market can come back with other solutions, and the housing company can ask into that and take that tender if they think that that solution one of the competitors provide is smarter than the one we have suggested. So that's the way it is. So it's not governmentally run. It's open. It's out there. Coming back to the first question about the earthquakes, there was actually also a question about the materials in the Circle House. The materials are concrete because we wanted to demonstrate that the superstructure could be made out of concrete. That was the purpose, and it is just the joints. We will use what I showed there, joints like the ones from Pico, where we screwed together, and in order to be able to take it apart again, we would use chalk mortar instead of concrete to cast in underneath to prevent from fire and smoke and noise and all of that. And we have tested it. We can blow it out with a high pressure water in 10 seconds, and then we can take it apart again. So it's doable. And coming back to Indonesia, coming back to places where you have earthquake, I'm not an expert on that, but I am a civil engineer, structural engineer, and I know that it's possible to do the joints also mechanically. And you could say if there are any defects, any twists in parts of the construction, it's probably to change that part of the construction. If it's designed for disassembly, then you don't need to tear down the whole building in some cases. So I think that could also be some other benefits, further benefits from using these methods. And then again, going back, you will have the steel in the joints, and steel is to some extent more flexible than concrete. And so I think there is lots of things. If the consulting engineers and the contractors go together, I'm sure we can find solutions that will work also in Indonesia. We have seen them also in parts of Europe where we have earthquakes too.
I don't have anything to add.
Actually, I also have a question for John. Yeah, in Indonesia, like I got many questions from architect, from a building owner about how to manage their waste construction.
How to manage that?
Waste construction from the building, from the old building actually. So they want to build new building, but there is a problem about the old building when they demolish it. And my question is, what is the first stage for a company or maybe local actor in Indonesia to implement circular economy in building and material?
Okay, I think I understand the question. Actually, what we did when we did our study and wrote the book, Building a Circular Future, is that we looked into how could we do if we changed our way of doing stuff from today going forward. Because if you look at existing buildings, at least in Denmark, I think you need 10, 15 different strategies to cope with this building, depending on what they are made of, how they are constructed, and so on and so forth. Actually, it's rather easy for us in Denmark to take apart all the buildings and reuse a number of the materials of all the buildings built before the Second World War. After the Second World War, we started to have building codes that told us that we need so much cement in the mortar between the bricks. So if you try to take it apart now, we break the bricks and not the mortar. So we actually need to change our building codes back. That's some of it. So if you have an existing building, you have to ask a consulting engineer to look at that specific building and see what can be done there. It's very difficult to generalize, but what we should do going forward is that we should make sure that we are not building in these kind of problems in our buildings going forward. So we are also working with the authorities on changing the building codes, and in some instances changing it back to what was the norms years ago, because nowadays we only use load-bearing brick walls for 10% of the brick walls we build. The rest is just a windshield, a rain shield.
Last question.
Hi, my name is Lotte from Greeneration. I have a question for Mr. Martin. In your presentation, you mentioned 10 R's of circular economy, with some examples that have been implemented in the Netherlands. I'm curious, according to you, which of these R's have the biggest potential to be applied in Indonesia's road to circular economy, or form a most important R for cooperation between the Netherlands and Indonesia in the way to circular economy?
That's a good question and a very difficult question. But like I said, if you have the 3 R's that are basically part of the solid waste management, that is something that the governments can do themselves very well. So they are actually in charge to do the recycling part. They can do most of the infrastructure, the collection, for instance, and let's say the bulking up to quantities that can be processed let's say not a small scale, but in a high scale, on a high economic scale. That is something where the authorities can do most of the work themselves. But for the other R's, it's the industry actually. And the industry, a lot of industry is also connected to other countries. So it's not something that you only do in Indonesia. So you have to come together as stakeholders in the value chain here. So what can Indonesia do themselves? That is, of course, the government can also, what we are doing, trying to make it interesting for the industry to do that. And also create platforms like this today. This is a good start of awareness raising in a sense that, okay, if we want to do it, I can't do it on my own if I'm a private enterprise. So, but there's no difference for Indonesia and Europe, because the companies that are here are sometimes companies that are all over the world, and sometimes companies that are in Indonesia and in the Netherlands or in Denmark. But so they can do it. It's not depending on Indonesia or whatever place you are. It depends if there is a market, and that is something where, again, the government can play a role, if there is a market to sell these products. And that's something that we understand in the Netherlands, that as a public authority, and that's not only the central government, but also the regional governments, the provinces and the cities, they buy these products generally. So especially in buildings, on infrastructure, but also on higher other equipments for city building, or just for offices. So many products that you're buying for clothing, for your offices, for the defense, what we also have in the defense, all the materials, ICT, so there's so much, and so the government can actually also play a role in demanding more circular products. And that's something what we actually could cooperate on governments, also with Denmark, what we're doing it also with other countries in Europe. We're trying to also bring other governments into the situation that they can handle circular procurement, as we call it. So circular buying of products and using the criteria that are needed. For instance, a very simple one. I want the next product, the next tables that I'm going to buy for my office should be 100% recycled material. That's a simple criteria where you can start with. And the next one, it should be bio-based. And the next one, so you can lift every time your demand to make it more circular. And the government can play an important role in actually pushing the industry in that direction and making it interesting for the industry to produce these products. And then we're there.
I'm also curious, in Netherlands, who is in charge, whose ministry that in charge in promoting and also monitoring circular economy? Ministry that in charge in promoting circular economy?
In charge, that's a very good question, because we used to be in charge, of course, with solid waste management, but I think the industry is more in charge now, because we set up cooperation tables for every one of these 5 tracks that we have, 5 sectors, and the industry is very strong involved in that, in setting the agendas, in defining the projects that needs to be done, in achieving the targets. So I think they're in charge pretty much now. And that's good, actually, because we want an economy, a circular economy, not a circular state or something like that. That's a good question, yeah.
And the last question, do you have like specific sector to boost circular economy in Netherlands?
if you look at the 5 ones, it's actually the whole industry.
Okay.
So we're not saying this one or that one. Of course, there are, let's say, more important parts maybe than the other one, and more issues currently that need to be tackled, like, for instance, the plastics. That is something that you say we have to push that pretty hard, because we're really polluting our environment with that.
Okay.
So that is when the issues are very strong. But now we also have some, for instance, currently in the Netherlands, the nitrate emissions problem. So everything, all constructions are stopped because of these issues. So, yeah.
How about in Denmark?
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, how about
I
in
see that Denmark have good progress on circular economy. They also have agenda and also roadmap also for industrial symbiosis.
I think that the way it works in Denmark is that we have in all industries people who are first movers, who start to promote new ideas. If we look at sustainable construction, which we started 2010 in Denmark, developed Danish Green Building Council in 2012, and now you can say that I attended the Danish Industries Conference, a yearly conference where we have all the top managers from Denmark assembled 2 weeks ago, and the whole discussion was on how we could actually make Denmark a more sustainable country, how we could reduce our CO2 emission by 2030 by 70%. We had the Prime Minister and we had the representatives for all the leading parties, and everybody agreed at that meeting that this is what we are going to do. The industry was there, all the ministers were there, everybody is in agreement, and I think that the next step for us, pioneers, is to make sure that they not only aim for the 70% CO2 reduction, but that we kick the circular economy forward with a big kick. And I think looking at the experience from sustainable construction and CO2 reduction, we will be there in a year or two, then they have to have a new subject, and this is it.
This is really interesting question, but fortunately, we are limited time right now. The timekeeper already decided that time's up. And I would like to welcome the speaker to give closing remark.
You want what?
About the closing remark, the suggestion of how to implement also maybe inspire for the audience here.
I think the closing remark is that you should think in cash flow. Every investment you make, also inspired from what you said about the lease, when we do something, you can certainly buy something too cheap. If you buy something too cheap, you'll just have a lot of cost maintaining until the day you realize that you need to have a better product. Do design and make products of high quality with an ability to be recirculated in the circular economy, no matter whether you own it or you lease it, and make sure that you nurse people who have a long-term strategy for investments, and that you in a way make it more difficult for people to succeed in investing and developing in new buildings that they sell off the day after and don't care a shit about how they are performing. Make sure that you develop and make buildings that last, and look at the long-term cost of owning and operating those buildings for the ones who are actually going to do it, and not for the one that develops them and sells them the day after.
I was triggered by your question, which sector deserves greater attention. I don't like to think about sectors, but more target groups. So I think we have to invest a lot on education, on campaigning. You know, like at home, even sometimes I have to fight with my sisters or with my parents so that they start recycling. This is like a very basic step, but I think that we can work on raising awareness about the environmental impacts of our current consumerism, and I would say just make sure to invest a lot on campaigning, on educating the regular citizen about the impacts of our deeds. So that's my final remark.
Yeah, I can only say that continue to do this, these kinds of events, because it brings together governments, it brings together the knowledge institutes, the IT Bandung I heard, and but yes, the institutes have to be there and the industry has to be there. They're today present too. Because awareness raising, this is something that has to work into your mind, and not only as a, let's say, employee from something or associated with one of these three, but also as a person, as a consumer. It has to go into your mind that you really reconsider how you want to have this world. That we can't keep on using all the resources and then we end up somewhere in we don't know where, or we can actually start with ourselves and reconsider what are you doing in your life, in your daily lifestyle. Do I need all these pair of shoes? Do I need all these things and whatever? Do I need my car so much? Well, all these things, you can question that, and you don't have to change your life from today till tomorrow, but just start on thinking it in your head, and that it's important that you do this. And then, finally, I hope, because as you see in the Netherlands, there are small startups doing things and big companies doing things, so everybody can start something here. So it's possible. It's not an impossible way.
So, as a conclusion, there are 3 points that we could implement related with circular economy in construction and also infrastructure. The first one is about research. So, it's really important to understand the baseline and also provide high quality of the product. And the second one is to increase awareness by education and campaign. And the third one is about ownership. And everybody has responsibility, everybody has power to change and also move forward Indonesia to better implementation on circular economy. And ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end of this presentation, and we'd like to say thank you so much for our presenter, and please big applause, give applause to our presenter. And also the audience for your active participation. And I hope this discussion could give feedback and also commitment to our own institution to implement it in our own organization. And I would like to give back this moderation to our MC, Apple.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Faiza. Give applause once again for our speakers and moderator for the second session in Breakout 3. And then before the end of the session, I want to invite our speaker and moderator to stand up together. We will have token appreciation, and then handed by Mr. Rian as the coordinator of this project. Okay, the verse will give to Mr. John Sommer. Thank you very much. The second one for Mr. Martin. Okay, and the third one for Miss Jessica. And of course, last but not least, I want to also give the token appreciation for our moderator for these 2 sections. Ms. Faiza, give applause for conduct this section. Thank you so much for all speakers and also moderator and Mr. Rian. Maybe we can take picture together first.
And please give applause also to Rian.
Yeah.
He's playing important part in coordinating Indonesia Circular Economy Forum.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Faiza, we will take pictures together. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much once again for all speaker and also moderator and Ms. Rian as coordinator for this project. And then finally we get in the last section, it's a closing. But I want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that tomorrow we'll still have the second day for the third Indonesia Circular Economy Forum. And then we will have 3 more breakout. Breakout 4, Breakout 5, and Breakout 6, and then 1 plenary session for tomorrow. And the registration will start for 9 a.m. I'm Saiful Hamdi. Thank you so much for participating in Breakout 3. Thank you so much and good afternoon.